Welcome to Sports Love Media on YouTube. It's your guy Sports Love with a sports update today, April 30th, 2025. Playoffs continue for high school sports in the state of Alabama for spring sports. Softball playoffs continue with regionals. In each of the classifications 1A through 7A, the top two teams from each area is moving on to regionals. The North Regional will be taking place in Florence, Alabama. East Regional will be Albertville, Alabama. South Regional will be in Gulf Shores. The Central Regional will be held in or near Montgomery. 8 teams from each regional will be involved for 32 total teams statewide for each of the classifications. The top 2 teams from the regionals in each of the 4 locations will advance to the state tournament for their classification 1A through 7A. Let's look at the matchups for each classification and each region regarding softball. We'll start with the North region for Class 1A. You have South Lamar versus Lynn, Berry versus Athens Bible, Hackleburg, Berry versus Athens Bible, Hackleburg versus Waterloo, and Brilliant involved in that. In 1A South, you have Leroy versus Red Level, Kinston versus Southern Choctaw, Brantley versus Millry, Sweetwater versus Florala. In 1A East region, it'll be Appalachian versus Skyline, Spring Garden versus Addison, Meek versus Jacksonville Christian Academy, Eider versus Victory Christian. And let's see, 1A Central regional, you'll have University Charter versus Billingsley, Autauga Academy versus Fayetteville, Maplesville versus Keith, Woodland versus Autaugaville. In Class 2A North Regional, you have Lamar County versus Belgreen, Summerton Christian versus Tharptown, Sologent versus Tuscaloosa Academy, Lindsay Lane Christian Academy. Then you have in the 2A East Regionals, you have West End versus Falkville, Pleasant Valley versus North Sand Mountain, Pisgah versus Sandrock, Decatur Heritage Christian Academy versus Cleveland. In the 2A Central Regional, you will have Highland Home versus Isabella, Reeltown versus Ranburn, Horseshoe Bend versus Central in Hayneville, Southeastern versus Lochapoka. In the 2A South Regional, J.U. Blackshear versus G.W. Long, Geneva County versus Zion Chapel, Ariton versus Washington County, Pike Liberal Arts versus Cottonwood. In the Class 3A North Regional, will be Winfield versus Rogers, Mars Hill Bible versus Whitesburg Christian, Madison Academy versus Colbert Heights, Lauderdale County versus Carbon Hill. 3A East Regional will be Randolph School versus Fife, Ohatchee versus Hanceville, Locust Fort versus Glencoe, Collinsville versus Weaver. 3A Central Regional will be St. James versus Greensboro, Lee Scott Academy versus Thorsby, Hale County versus Alabama Christian Academy, Childersburg versus Beulah. The 3A South Regional will be Mobile Christian versus XL, Wicksburg versus Southside and Selma, T.R. Miller versus Cottage Hill Christian Academy, Thomasville versus Providence Christian. In 4A North Regional for softball, you will have Cordova versus Danville, Curry versus Hatton, Good Hope versus Dora, Wilson versus Hamilton. 4A East Regional will be Asheville versus Westminster Christian, Alexandria versus Plainview, West Limestone versus Etowah, Madison County versus White Plains. In the 4A Central Regional, you'll have Central Prattville Christian versus Pleasant Grove, American Christian Academy versus Hanley, Oak Grove versus Tallahassee, Munford versus West Blockton. In the 4A South Regional, you'll have Orange Beach versus Ashford, Jackson versus Strawn, Dale County versus Satsuma, Opp versus W.S. Neal. In Class 5A, North Regionals for softball, Boaz versus Arab, Lawrence County versus Priceville, Scottsboro versus Sardis, Ardmore versus Russellville. In the 5A East, it'll be Northside versus Lincoln, Moody versus Corner, St. Clair County versus John Carroll Catholic, Springville versus Leeds. In the 5A Central Regional, it'll be Holtsville versus Jemison, Beauregard versus Sylacauga, Demopolis versus Brubaker Tech, Shelby County versus Elmore County. In the 5A South Regional, it'll be Alberta versus Charles Henderson, Faith Academy versus Headland, Andalusia versus UMS Wright Prep, Houston Academy versus St. Paul's Episcopal. In the 6A North Regional, it'll be Jasper versus Hartselle, Southside versus Buckhorn, Athens versus Mortimer Jordan, Hazel Green versus Fort Payne. In 6A East Region, you will have Homewood versus Oxford, Mountain Brook versus Clay Chalkville, Pell City versus Minor, Gardendale versus Woodlawn. For 6A Central, Chilton County versus Spain Park, Brookwood versus McAdory, Helena versus Calera, Hueytown versus Northridge. In 6A South, it'll be Saraland versus Pike Road, Spanish Fort versus Stanhope Elmore, Rehoboth versus Theodore, Wetumpka versus Baldwin County. In 7A North Regional, it'll be Sparkman versus Florence, Austin versus Huntsville. In the 7A East, it'll be Thompson versus Hewitt-Trussville, Hoover versus Huntsville. 7A Central will be Enterprise versus Auburn. Then Central Phoenix City versus Dothan. In the 7A South region, it will be Baker versus Fairhope and Daphne versus Mary G. Montgomery. Moving on in high school soccer for Alabama, 1A through 4A and 7A are in second round of the playoffs, where 5A and 6A are in the third round. For 1A through 4A and 7A, we will look at first round scores, then preview matchups for second round. For 5A and 6A, we will look at second round scores and preview matches for the third round of the playoffs. In 1A to 3A girls, first round scores: Glencoe 9, Sachs 3, Donahoe 10, St. Bernard Prep 0, Madison Academy 1, Whitesburg Christian 0, Houston Academy 10, Mobile Christian 0, Providence Christian 2, Bayshore Christian 0, Tuscaloosa Academy 3, Glenwood 1, Lee Scott Academy 6, Altamont 1. For round 2, it will be as follows for matchups: Tuscaloosa Academy versus Lee Scott Academy, Houston Academy versus Providence Christian, Madison Academy versus Collinsville, Glencoe versus Donahoe. In 1A through 3A boys, Susan Moore 10, Donahoe 0, Weaver 3, J.B. Pennington 2, Sylvania 3, Tanner 2, Collinsville 8, Tharptown 1, Providence Christian 7, Cottage Hill Christian Academy 0, Houston Academy 8, Mobile Christian 1, Tuscaloosa Academy 4, Alabama Christian Academy 0, Altamont 2, Lee Scott Academy 1. For round 2, it'll be Altamont versus Tuscaloosa Academy, Providence Christian versus Houston Academy, Tanner versus Collinsville, and Susan Moore versus Weaver. In Class 4A girls, round 1 scores are as follows: Cherokee County 2, Talladega 1, Hoax Bluff 4, White Plains 1, Mars Hill Bible 1, Danville 0, St. John Paul II 11, Haleyville 0, Orange Beach 10, New Brockton 0, St. Luke's Episcopal 10, Geneva 0, Westminster School at Oak Mountain 1, St. James 0, Montgomery Catholic 2, American Christian Academy 0. Round 2 action will be as follows: Westminster School at Oak Mountain versus Montgomery Catholic, Orange Beach versus St. Luke's Episcopal, Mars Hill Bible versus St. John Paul II, Cherokee County versus Hoax Bluff. Sorry about the noise. There's dogs nearby that are barking out here. So, in 4A boys soccer, first round scores are as follows: Aniana 4, Talladega 0, White Plains 5, Hoax Bluff 3, Mars Hill Bible 2, Madison County 0, West Morgan 7, Haleyville 1, Orange Beach 1, Bullock County 0, St. Luke's Episcopal 6, Dale County 1, Westminster School at Oak Mountain 2, St. James 1, Trinity Presbyterian 5, Fultondale 0. Round 2 action will be as follows: Westminster School at Oak Mountain versus Trinity Presbyterian, Orange Beach versus St. Luke's Episcopal, Mars Hill Bible versus West Morgan, Aniana versus White Plains. 5A girls are in the second round, so for the 5A girls second round scores, you have Springville 4, John Carroll Catholic 2, Westbrook Christian 2, Jacksonville 0. Guntersville 2, Arab 0. Westminster Christian 8, Priceville 0. St. Michael Catholic 2, Faith Academy 0. Carroll 2, Charles Henderson 1. Elmore County 3, Holtville 2. Indian Springs 6, Sylacauga 0. Third round matches are as follows for the girls in Class 6A soccer. Indian Springs versus Elmore County, St. Michael Catholic versus Carroll, Guntersville versus Westminster Christian, Springville versus Westbrook Christian. In 5A boys round 2 action, Springville 1, Leeds 0, Boaz 4, Douglas 2, Guntersville 2, Scottsboro 1, Russellville 3, Westminster Christian 1, Faith Academy 5, St. Michael Catholic 3, Charles Henderson 2, Andalusia 0, Demopolis 2, Brubaker Tech 1. Also, you have Indian Springs 2, Montevallo 0. In third round action, it will be Indian Springs versus Demopolis, Faith Academy versus Charles Henderson, Guntersville versus Russellville, Springville versus Boaz. In 6A girls, round 2, scores were as follows for soccer. Mountain Brook 3, Homewood 2, Pell City 1, Shades Valley 0, Southside 1, Fort Payne 0, Athens 2, Randolph School 1, Spanish Fort 4, St. Paul's Episcopal 1, Pike Road 8, Stanhope Elmore 0, Northridge 2, Calera 1, Broward Christian 1, Spain Park 0. Round 3 matchups are as follows. Briarwood Christian versus Northridge, Spanish Fort versus Pike Road, Southside versus Athens, Mountain Brook versus Pell City. In Class 6A boys action, round 2 for soccer action, you have Mountain Brook 3, Homewood 1, Gardendale 2, Oxford 0, Southside 5, Gadsden City 3, Randolph School 3, Buckhorn 2, Spanish Fort 4, St. Paul's Episcopal 0, Stanhope Elmore 5, Pike Road 4, Calera 2, Northridge 0, Chelsea 3, Briarwood Christian 2. In round 3, action will be as follows. Calera versus Chelsea, Spanish Fort versus Stanhope Elmore, Southside versus Randolph School, Mountain Brook versus Gardendale. In Class 7A, round 1, soccer action, Vestavia Hills 10, Prattville 0, Thompson 1, Oak Mountain 0, James Clemens 3, Huntsville 0, Grissom 2, Bob Jones 1, Daphne 3, Davidson 0, McGill Tulin 1, Fairhope 0, Auburn 2, Dothan 0, Montgomery Academy 9, Smith Station 0. In round 2 action, it will be Auburn versus Montgomery Academy, Daphne versus McGill Tulin, James Clemens versus Grissom, Vestavia Hills versus Thompson. In Class 7A boys action, round 1 scores were as follows. Oak Mountain High School 6, Tharpton 0, Prattville 2, Hoover 1, Grissom 2, Florence 1, Bob Jones 1, Huntsville 0, Fairhope 1, Baker 0, W.P. Davidson High School 2, Foley 1, Auburn 1, Dothan 0, Montgomery Academy 9, Central Phoenix City 1. Round 2 action will be as follows. Auburn versus Montgomery Academy, Fairhope versus W.P. Davidson High School, Grissom versus Bob Jones, Oak Mountain High School versus Prattville. Note, in high school regionals for softball, the format will be double elimination. High school soccer will be dealing with a single elimination format regarding who moves on to the next round. So with the sports update for today, thank you for listening to this on Sports Live Media. It is greatly appreciated. If you will, please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the notification bell so you can be made aware when I'm doing these sports updates, when I have breaking news in the sports world, when I broadcast live, when I have sports action videos, and when I have sports education videos. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day.